Blanche Taylor Moore was accused of fatally poisoning her first husband, also accused of poisoning her second husband. The jury found her guilty, and Moore was sentenced to death.
A woman in her 90s sits in a prison cell in North Carolina. She has white hair, a grandmotherly face, and the kind of smile you'd expect to see at a church potluck. But don't let that fool you. This woman is on death row, waiting for an execution that may never come. Her name is Blanche Taylor Moore, and she's known by a much darker nickname, the Black Widow. At over 90 years old, she holds a grim record. The oldest woman on death row in the entire United States. For more than 3 decades, Blanche has insisted she's innocent, but the evidence tells a very different story. A story of mysterious illnesses, agonizing deaths, and a poison that left a trail of bodies in its wake. Blanche wasn't some obvious monster. She went to church every Sunday. She worked at the local grocery store for years. She had children and grandchildren who loved her. To everyone who knew her, she seemed perfectly normal, maybe even kind. But behind that sweet smile was something much more sinister. One by one, the men closest to her started getting sick. Her father, her first husband, her boyfriend, even her second husband barely escaped with his life.
I have no doubts as to her guilt.
Now 76 years old, Reverend Moore is still a part-time pastor at a small country church in Southern Virginia. He survived arsenic poisoning 20 years ago, but his health has never been the same since.
When doctors finally discovered what was happening, the whole nation was shocked. How could a church-going grandmother be capable of such evil? What drove her to do it? And most chilling of all, how many people did she actually kill? Before we dive into this disturbing story, please take a moment to like this video and share it with anyone who loves true crime. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now, let's uncover the truth about the Black Widow. Blanche Kaiser was born on February 17, 1933, in Concord, North Carolina. She grew up in a small town called Fort Valley as the oldest of 3 children. Her parents were Parker Davis Kaiser and Flonnie Blanche Kaiser, née Honeycutt. On the surface, they seemed like a respectable family. Parker worked as a mill worker and was even an ordained Baptist minister, but behind closed doors, things were very different. Parker Kaiser had a serious drinking problem. He was also a womanizer who cheated on his wife regularly. But the worst part, Blanche later claimed that her father forced her into prostitution to pay off his gambling debts. Whether this was completely true or not, one thing is clear. Blanche's childhood was far from normal. Growing up in that kind of environment left deep scars on young Blanche. She learned early on how to survive in a world that wasn't safe. She learned how to adapt, how to hide her true feelings, and how to become whoever she needed to be. As a teenager and young woman, Blanche developed a strange and unsettling personality. People who knew her noticed something odd about the way she talked. One moment she would be quoting Bible verses like a good preacher's daughter. The next moment she would switch to sexually explicit topics without any warning. It was like she had 2 completely different sides to her personality. This ability to switch between different personas would serve her well throughout her life. She could be the sweet religious woman at church on Sunday morning. Then she could be someone entirely different when the situation called for it. Looking back, these were early warning signs of someone who knew how to manipulate people. Blanche learned to read situations and become whatever people wanted her to be. She could quote scripture to gain trust. She could play the victim to gain sympathy. She could be charming when she needed something. Her father, Parker Kaiser, died in 1966. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack. He was gone, but the damage he had done to his daughter would echo for decades to come. And soon, people around Blanche would start dying too. On May 29, 1952, 19-year-old Blanche Kaiser married James Napoleon Taylor. James was a Korean War veteran who worked as a furniture restorer. They seemed like a typical young couple, starting their life together. Over the next few years, they had 2 children, one born in 1953 and another in 1959. In 1954, Blanche got a job as a cashier at Kroger, a local grocery store in Burlington, North Carolina. She was good at her job and worked hard. By 1959, she had climbed as high as a woman could go in that company at the time. She became head cashier, the highest position available to female employees. To customers in management, Blanche seemed like a model employee. She was reliable, efficient, and always professional. But her co-workers saw a different side of her. Some workers who were interviewed years later called her vindictive and two-faced. They said she could be sweet to your face, but would turn on you the moment your back was turned. Still, Blanche kept her job and seemed to be living a perfectly normal life. She had a husband, 2 kids, and a steady paycheck. From the outside, everything looked fine. Then in 1962, something changed. A man named Raymond Reid became the store manager at Kroger. Raymond was divorced, and like Blanche, seemed to be just another regular person trying to make a living. But soon, Blanche and Raymond started spending time together. What began as a working relationship slowly turned into something more. Blanche was still married to James Taylor, but that didn't stop her. She and Raymond Reid began an affair that would continue for years. They kept it quiet at first, hiding their relationship from co-workers and family. Blanche had learned long ago how to keep secrets, and this was just the beginning of the secrets she would keep. In 1966, Blanche's father, Parker Davis Kaiser, died suddenly. Doctors said it was a heart attack. Nobody questioned it. Heart attacks were common, especially for men his age. Blanche buried her father and moved on with her life. At the time, no one had any reason to suspect anything unusual. 7 years later, on October 2, 1973, tragedy struck again. Blanche's husband, James Napoleon Taylor, died at the age of 45. Once again, doctors ruled it a heart attack. James was relatively young, but heart problems can happen to anyone. Blanche was now a widow with 2 children. Friends and family felt sorry for her loss. With James gone, Blanche and Raymond Reid no longer had to hide their relationship. They started dating publicly. Everyone thought it was sweet that Blanche had found love again after losing her husband. But something dark was lurking beneath the surface, something that wouldn't be discovered for many years. Blanche's mother-in-law, Isla Taylor, also became ill during this time. She suffered from mysterious symptoms that doctors couldn't quite explain. Unlike the others, Isla survived, but she was never quite the same afterward. For years, these deaths and illnesses seemed unconnected, just bad luck, just unfortunate coincidences. After all, people die from heart attacks all the time, and people get sick. There was no reason to suspect foul play. But here's what nobody knew at the time. All 3 of these people had something deadly in their bodies, something that had been put there intentionally, something called arsenic. Arsenic is a poison that has been used by killers for centuries. It's sometimes called inheritance powder, because so many people have used it to kill family members for money. In small doses over time, arsenic causes symptoms that look like natural illness. Victims get stomach pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. They feel weak and tired. Doctors often mistake it for the flu or food poisoning. In larger amounts or over a longer period, arsenic attacks the nervous system. It causes nerve damage, organ failure, and eventually death. And here's the scary part. It can look exactly like a heart attack. When investigators finally exhumed the bodies of Parker Kaiser and James Taylor years later, they found shocking evidence. Both men had extremely high levels of arsenic in their tissues. Parker's levels were elevated but not quite lethal. James Taylor's arsenic levels were 60 times higher than normal, absolutely fatal. Isla Taylor's body also showed high arsenic levels, though not enough to kill her. The pattern was becoming clear. People close to Blanche kept getting sick, and many of them died. After James Taylor's death in 1973, Blanche and Raymond Reid finally stopped hiding their relationship. They had been having an affair since 1962, and now they could be together openly. Raymond was a good man, according to people who knew him. Blanche's daughters liked him too. One of them later said, "He was a very good man. He was good to us." Raymond and Blanche dated for years. They seemed happy together. Raymond told a co-worker that they probably would have been married, except she wanted to be there next to her family. Kroger kept transferring Raymond to different stores, but Blanche preferred to stay in Burlington, near her children and grandchildren. By 1985, their relationship had lasted over 2 decades. But then something changed. The relationship started to fall apart. Blanche left her job at Kroger in October 1985. That same year, she began to date other men, including Robert J. Hutton, the store's regional manager. Blanche had to keep this relationship secret. She was in the middle of a lawsuit against Kroger, where she claimed she was completely alienated and antagonistic towards men. If anyone found out she was dating, it could hurt her case. After that relationship ended, she filed a sexual harassment lawsuit against Hutton and the store. She eventually won that lawsuit and received $275,000. On New Year's Eve, going into 1986, Blanche invited Raymond over to her home. She served him some of her homemade potato soup. It seemed like a nice gesture, a home-cooked meal to ring in the new year. But the next day, January 1st, 1986, Raymond became violently ill. He had severe nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. This was strange because Raymond was known as someone who rarely got sick. Yet over the next few months, he missed more than 4 weeks of work. He kept getting sicker and sicker. By May 29, 1986, Raymond's condition had gotten so bad that his long career at Kroger came to an end. He couldn't work anymore. Less than 5 months later, on October 7, 1986, Raymond Reid died at Baptist Hospital in Winston-Salem. He was only 50 years old. Doctors were puzzled. They diagnosed him with Guillain-Barré syndrome. What they didn't know was that a toxicology screen had been ordered. The results showed a lethal level of arsenic, but the resident in charge of Reid's care rotated to another hospital, and the new resident never passed the results on. So, it seemed to fit his symptoms, and nobody questioned it. Raymond was buried, and once again, Blanche had lost someone close to her. On Easter Sunday in 1985, while she was still dating Raymond Reid, Blanche met a man named Dwight Moore. Dwight was the divorced pastor of the Carolina United Church of Christ in rural Alamance County. They started meeting for meals and spending time together. After Raymond Reid died in October 1986, Blanche and Dwight could finally be open about their relationship. They talked about getting married, but in 1987, Blanche was diagnosed with breast cancer. They postponed the wedding. Then Blanche developed a mysterious intestinal problem that required 2 surgeries. The wedding was pushed back again. Finally, on April 19, 1989, Blanche and Dwight got married. They went on a honeymoon to New Jersey. Everything seemed perfect, but within days of returning home, Dwight became violently ill. He collapsed after eating a fast food chicken sandwich that Blanche had given him. The sickness was extreme, severe nausea and vomiting that wouldn't stop. On April 28, 1989, Dwight was admitted to Alamance County Hospital. His condition was so bad that he was transferred between multiple hospitals. Finally, he ended up at North Carolina Memorial Hospital in Chapel Hill. There, his condition got worse and worse. He was near death, hooked up to a ventilator with his liver, kidneys, and heart all failing. Dwight had mentioned to doctors that he'd been working with herbicides after the honeymoon, so doctors ordered a toxicology screen to check for herbicide poisoning. When the results came back on March 13th, everyone was shocked. Dwight had 20 times the lethal dose of arsenic in his system. It was the most arsenic ever found in a living patient in that hospital's history. The hospital immediately notified the police and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. This wasn't an accident. Someone had poisoned Dwight Moore, and investigators needed to find out who. Police interviewed Dwight from his hospital bed. Even though he was barely alive, he told them something important. He mentioned that a former boyfriend of Blanche's had died from Guillain-Barré syndrome. That caught the investigators' attention because Guillain-Barré syndrome has symptoms very similar to arsenic poisoning. As detectives dug deeper into Blanche's background, they discovered some disturbing facts. Blanche had tried to change Dwight's pension to make herself the main beneficiary. She had also done something very suspicious. She had Dwight's hair cut short to prevent investigators from getting hair samples. Hair can show a timeline of poison exposure, so this was a clear attempt to destroy evidence. Investigators had to use pubic hair samples instead. The more they investigated, the more suspicious deaths they found connected to Blanche. Her father, her first husband, her boyfriend, Raymond Reid, all had died under mysterious circumstances. Dr. John Butts, North Carolina's chief medical examiner at the time, requested permission to exhume Raymond Reid's body. When they examined Reid's remains, they found something shocking. His tissues contained lethal concentrations of arsenic. Dr. Butts later explained that Reid's medical records showed repeated episodes of arsenic poisoning over about 4 months. The investigation didn't stop there. Authorities ordered more examinations. They dug up the bodies of James Taylor, Blanche's first husband. They exhumed Parker Kaiser, her father. They exhumed Isa Taylor, her mother-in-law. They even exhumed Joseph Mitchell, a former co-worker. The forensic results were damning. James Taylor's body showed arsenic levels 60 times higher than normal, absolutely fatal. Parker Kaiser had high arsenic levels, though not quite enough to be lethal on their own. Isla Taylor also had elevated arsenic. Only Joseph Mitchell's body showed no arsenic. The most revealing evidence came from hair analysis. When scientists tested strands of hair from the victims, they could see a timeline of arsenic exposure. The poison hadn't been given all at once. It had been administered slowly over long periods of time in multiple doses. Dr. Butts explained how arsenic kills. People will become very ill, vomit, develop diarrhea. They may develop a rash, and then maybe a week or 2 later, they'll develop neurological signs. These involve tingling, odd sensations, burning sensations beginning in the hands and feet. It was a slow, painful way to die. And the evidence showed that Blanche had done this to multiple people over more than 20 years. On July 18, 1989, police arrested Blanche Taylor Moore. She was charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Raymond Reid and James Taylor. She was also charged with assault with a deadly weapon for poisoning Dwight Moore. The arrest made headlines across North Carolina and soon spread nationwide. The media couldn't get enough of the story. A church-going grandmother accused of poisoning multiple people. It was shocking and disturbing. The press gave Blanche a nickname that would stick forever, the Black Widow. Like the spider that kills its mate, Blanche was accused of killing the men closest to her. The name fit perfectly, and soon everyone knew her by it. Former Alamance County Sheriff Richard Fry spoke to reporters and seemed stunned by the accusations. "We're talking about an average, ordinary neighborhood lady," he said. "Nobody could believe that someone so normal-looking could be capable of such horrible crimes." But Blanche insisted she was innocent. She denied everything. According to her, she had never poisoned anyone. The deaths were just tragic coincidences. She claimed that both Raymond Reid and James Taylor had been depressed and might have taken arsenic themselves. Investigators found this explanation highly improbable. Why would multiple people around the same woman all decide to poison themselves? As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors made a strategic decision. They had evidence for multiple murders, but they chose to focus on just one, the death of Raymond Reid. They believed this case had the strongest evidence. The charges related to James Taylor and Dwight Moore were dropped after she was convicted, though the evidence from those cases would still play a crucial role in court. On October 21, 1990, Blanche Moore's trial began in Winston-Salem. The prosecution's case was built on a foundation laid by a separate civil lawsuit. Raymond Reid's family had sued Baptist Hospital for malpractice. Under the rules of that civil case, the family's lawyers were able to gather most of the evidence against Moore, which was then used in the criminal trial. The nation was watching. He decided that prosecutors could present evidence about the poisonings of James Taylor, Dwight Moore, and Parker Kaiser, even though Blanche was only on trial for killing Raymond Reid. This decision would prove crucial. The prosecution brought forward 53 witnesses. One by one, they painted a damning picture of Blanche's actions. Hospital workers testified that they saw Blanche bringing food to Raymond Reid while he was hospitalized. Nurses recalled seeing her feed him banana pudding, peanut butter milkshakes, tomato pudding, cornbread, and milk. Medical records showed that Reid would feel fine, then become violently ill after Blanche's visits. Lisa Hutchkins, the head nurse in the intensive care unit, gave emotional testimony. She said that after one of Blanche's visits, Reid was in acute respiratory distress and was terrified. "Please help me or I'm going to die," Reid had told her. Reid's son Stephen testified about visiting his father on October 4th and finding him eating breakfast that Blanche had prepared. 2 days later, when Stephen returned to the hospital, he barely recognized his father. Reid was bloated. His eyeballs were even starting to swell, and his skin was splitting. Several witnesses testified about a poison called anti-ant, which contained arsenic. Brenda Green, a Kroger co-worker, said she heard Blanche recommend anti-at to a customer. Dwight Moore testified that in the summer of 1985, Blanche showed him a bottle of anti-ant and asked him to buy some for her. Leonard Wolfe, who owned a local store, said Blanche came in during April 1989 asking if he had any anti-ant in stock. The defense tried to paint Blanche as a caring religious woman who would never hurt anyone. When Blanche took the stand, she denied everything. She said she never fed Reid in the ICU. She claimed she never saw him eat any food during that time. She denied ever buying or asking anyone to buy anti-ant. But then came a bizarre twist. The defense presented a letter supposedly written by a homeless man named Garvin Thomas, who had since died. The letter claimed that Thomas, not Blanche, had poisoned Reid. State handwriting experts examined the confession letter carefully. Their conclusion was devastating for the defense. The letter wasn't written by Garvin Thomas at all. Blanche Moore had written it herself. Experts ruled out Thomas as the author to a 99% degree of certainty. Blanche had tried to frame a dead homeless man for her crimes. On November 14, 1990, the jury reached their verdict. They found Blanche K. Taylor Moore guilty of first-degree murder. Throughout the trial, Blanche had maintained a calm, detached demeanor. She sat quietly with a tight smile, showing little emotion, even during the most damning testimony. But when the guilty verdict was read and the jurors filed past her, that composure finally broke. Blanche wept. 3 days later, on November 17th, the jury recommended the death penalty. They found that Blanche had killed Raymond Reid for financial gain, and that his murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. On January 18, 1991, the judge agreed with the jury and sentenced Blanche Moore to death by lethal injection. Her defense attorney, David Tamer, spoke to reporters afterward. She said to me, "The end has to come. Let it come. We'll deal with it." He said, although she was strong in that regard, it was painful to see her broken by that verdict. Tamer himself would later face legal troubles and was convicted of embezzlement for misappropriating client funds, including Moore's. Blanche's family was devastated. They never believed she could get a fair trial with all the media attention. One of her attorneys said, "Everything we've been able to learn about her is a picture of a model person. That in and of itself should have run up the reasonable doubt flag for the jury, but I'm afraid there was just too much poison and too many different people." 10 days after sentencing, Blanche received a stay of execution pending an appeal. Her legal team argued that she hadn't received a fair trial and that evidence about the other deaths shouldn't have been allowed. On November 16, 1990, Blanche Taylor Moore was transferred to the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. She became prisoner. This would be her home for the rest of her life. In 1994, the North Carolina State Supreme Court rejected her appeals. The court ruled that she had received a fair trial. They noted that the evidence clearly showed a pattern. 3 different men either married to or intimately involved with Blanche Taylor Moore died or barely escaped death from arsenic poisoning. The court pointed out that in each case Blanche had motive, opportunity, and access to the poison. Life on death row was quiet and uneventful for Blanche. She spent her time writing poetry and music. She had 2 minor rule violations during her decades in prison, one in February 2008 for disobeying orders, and another in November 1996 for misuse of medicine. Blanche's health became a major concern as the years passed. She battled breast cancer and had to undergo both chemotherapy and radiation therapy. As she aged, her health continued to decline. In 2010, Blanche and 11 other death row inmates from Forsyth County filed a motion under North Carolina's Racial Justice Act. They argued that their sentences should be converted to life imprisonment because of issues with the racial composition of their juries. The motion was ultimately unsuccessful. Meanwhile, North Carolina stopped executing prisoners. The last execution in the state took place on August 18, 2006. After that, no one else was put to death. This meant that Blanche would likely never face lethal injection. Instead, she would simply grow old and die in prison. Blanche Taylor Moore's case captured the public imagination in a way few murder cases do. The story of a grandmother who poisoned people with arsenic was too shocking to ignore. In 1993, author Jim Schuetze wrote a book about the case titled Preacher's Girl: The Life and Crimes of Blanche Taylor Moore. The book dug deep into Blanche's background and presented evidence that she may have done even more than what she was convicted for. Schutz suggested that Blanche might have set up her former boss in a sexual harassment lawsuit and may have intentionally started 2 fires at her mobile home. Later that same year, the book was turned into a television movie. Actress Elizabeth Montgomery, famous for playing Samantha in the TV show Bewitched, portrayed Blanche in Black Widow Murders, the Blanche Taylor Moore story. The film brought the case to millions of viewers across America. The fascination didn't end there. Over the years, Blanche's crimes have been featured in numerous true crime shows and documentaries. The Discovery Channel's The New Detectives covered her case in an episode called Women Who Kill. The show Evil Lives Here featured her story in an episode titled The Black Widow. The popular show Snapped also dedicated an episode to her crimes. The true crime podcast Case File covered her case in episode 66. Netflix 2019 series Poisonous Lions included her story. Even the show Deadly Women featured a reenactment of her crimes. The case continues to fascinate people because it challenges our assumptions about who can be a killer. Blanche looked like everyone's grandmother. She went to church. She seemed normal. And that's exactly what made her so terrifying. On February 17, 2023, Blanche Taylor Moore turned 90 years old. She became the oldest woman on death row in the entire United States. She's still alive today, still in her cell at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women, still claiming she's innocent. The Reverend Dwight Moore, the man who miraculously survived her poisoning, filed for divorce in December 1990. He eventually remarried and moved to Virginia. He told reporters that he had no objections to Blanche seeking to have her death sentence overturned. Dwight passed away from natural causes in 2013, still suffering from the permanent damage the arsenic had done to his hands and feet. The families of Raymond Reid and James Taylor never got the closure they deserved. Their loved ones died painful, terrifying deaths, slowly poisoned over months by someone they trusted. Blanche Taylor Moore's story raises uncomfortable questions. How could someone who seems so normal be capable of such evil? How many people did she actually kill? And why did she do it? Was it for money, for freedom, or simply because she could? The truth may have died with the victims she left behind, but the evidence speaks for itself. The arsenic doesn't lie. What do you think? Do you believe Blanche Taylor Moore is guilty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The file on Blanche Taylor Moore is officially closed, but this investigation is far from over. We know that for every case that gets a final headline, there are thousands that go cold. Is there a case that's always bothered you? Maybe it's that one local mystery that never got solved. Or maybe it's a headline you saw from across the country, a case that just disappeared from the news, where the official story just doesn't add up. This is where you come in. Comment below with the one case, from any time, any place, that you believe the authorities got wrong or swept under the rug. We read every single comment, and your case might be the one we investigate next.
Uncovering the details they don't want you to know. But we can't do it without you. If you want us to investigate the cases that really matter, you have to do your part. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Like this video, share this with everyone you know who's tired of easy answers. Don't just watch the news, help us decide what to uncover. We'll see you in the comments.